addicts. Yes, I'm calling you a jewelry addict because you wouldn't be here if you weren't a jewelry addict. So moving on. I'm back because I want to continue on with the video series that I have been doing for the Eternity Circle necklace that I've been making for a client of mine. It went from being in a sheet such as this to then cutting it out into a disc like this to cutting out the center, so now it's more of a circle, and finally as this. So I wanted to basically go in and true up the inner part of the circle. I have been working with the file, my flex shaft, and I've been sanding the inner and the outer diameter so that I could get it nice and smooth. And I've been going around with my dividers and making sure that everything is what I need it to be as far as the size, because I don't want to have like an elliptical. Now I have the sanding stick that I can go in. I'm gonna have to adjust this because it's a little too thick, but I will adjust this and then go in there and file or sand and clean up the inside, make sure that it's nice and round, and then I'll double check the inner with the outer diameter and then make sure everything is the same size all the way around. And once that's done, then I can move on into stamping the piece. Actually, I'll have to file the back because the back, when I cut it out with the saw, I believe you might have seen, if you haven't seen, there's a video of me actually, I've sped it up and I've gone through and cut out the discs. So as I'm rotating the sheet, it gets a little marked up on the back. So I'll go in and file that clean, and then the top part where I remove the paper, it's nice and smooth. We'll have to go in and clean it up just a little bit more to make sure that there are no scratches or anything, because when I go to hammer the top surface with the texture, I don't want to have any of those scratches coming through the hammer texture. They'll show up and then it's hard to go in and clean up, and you know, so I want everything to be done prior to doing the hammered stage. And then once that's done, I've already created the jump rings, and I had mentioned in the previous video, I don't know, 1 or 2 videos ago, that I was going to be making the jump rings and they were going to be oval. So if you can see that, I've created the oval shape and I've double checked they do in fact fit on this already. With all the filing and sanding that I'm doing, it's taking down some of the surface, truing it up, and then also allowing the jump ring to have a little more play. With the chain attached to the jump ring and the jump ring attached to the circle, it's a really tight fit. And I want a really tight fit for one, because if you use a jump ring that's slightly too on the larger side, it gives a little too much play and it can sometimes distract from the look of the piece. So it's important to take into consideration the scale, which I'd mentioned in a previous video before. I think it was the very first video that I did in this series. So you'll be able to, I'll have all the links to the different videos and which parts they are so that you can follow them through, so that if you're already here and you want to go back, you can do that. So anyway, back to this. So we have to take into consideration the scale, and I had mentioned that before, that in using my client's stone, it was going to be, you know, on the bigger side compared to the diamonds I usually use in this necklace. So this is obviously much larger, so to fit the stone. So when the two come together, they look really nice scale-wise. So we want enough negative space in the center, but also we don't want too much negative space. So there's a fine line in finding that balance. And in those initial videos, I was talking about how I went and figured all of that out. I did a sketch, and with that, I figured it was good. It felt balanced. It didn't feel out of whack or anything. So the same rings true with the jump rings. I tried different sizes, and I'll show you. I made this larger size of an oval jump ring because I wasn't sure. I got some, I used the dividers to get an idea of the size. Dividers are these tools. And I got an idea of the size of the width in the circle. And then also I had to consider the thickness of the jump ring. And I first started with the 19 gauge, which is quite thin, but it's thicker than 20, thinner than 18. I won't go into all the details on wire gauges and such, but just know that 19 gauge is a pretty nice wire gauge to work with on certain things that I'm finding just in my own experiments. And then I went back and said, well, that seems a little too thin because the size of the jump ring at that point, it was much larger. So because I went up in size, so then I decided, well, what if I go thicker and go smaller? Well, when I did that, I used 18 gauge, which are these, which is much, it's not much thicker, but it's a size thicker. And when you drop the size in the the diameter of the jump ring, that alters everything as well. And that's called aspect ratio. So there's a whole mathematical equation on that. Again, I won't go into all of that because it does my head in. Just know that there is a big difference. It's like taking different size donuts. And if you were to try to link the donuts together, they would have to work. And if you have a large donut and a very small donut, you're going to have more play on the larger side versus the smaller side, but also the thickness of the donut comes into play. And that's where, again, you're dealing with aspect ratio. So anyway, after experimenting, I went back to the 19 gauge wire, and I decided to try that because also with my chain that I'm using, there's only so much inner diameter space to use, meaning to be able to put this jump ring through that. So I had to go back down because the 18 gauge is too thick. And so I went back to the 19 gauge. I was considering 20, but I still feel 20 is just too thin. So I went back to the 19 gauge. This is the end result, and it worked just fine. It was perfect. It was like, it's still, like I said, leaning towards the tighter side, but that's good because, again, with all the filing and sanding that I'm doing to refine the circle at hand, I wanted to be able to make sure that there's not too much play, that it's not too loose, and that it fits nice and snug so that the design from the oval jump rings attached to the circle and then attached to the chain, that it all just flows seamlessly. So it's very important. It's all these little details that when you think about those and you take them into consideration and you work with them and you make slight adjustments, that's what makes the jewelry so much better. Well, it's not the only thing. It's one of the parts that makes it so much better. So with that, that's what I have been up to so far. Like I said, I'm going to adjust the stick so that I can go ahead and file the inside of the circle. And I'll go ahead and show a little bit of that. I think I'll go ahead and speed it up as well, because it's just, the video is now getting quite long. So anyway, I hope you enjoy that. And I'm going to ask you now, if you like the information I'm giving and the behind the scenes that I'm showing you, please give me a thumbs up, subscribe, comment below. What part of this has been intriguing to you so far? Has it been the whole process? Maybe you haven't seen the whole process. Do you like the me explaining about all the fine details, like I said, taking into consideration the scale of the stone, the size of the circle, and the chain, and then the jump rings? I mean, what part of this do you find fascinating? Maybe it's not really fascinating. Maybe you just like the jewelry, and that's okay too. Totally good with that. But go ahead and leave a comment below. Let me know what you're thinking, and yeah, or just say hi, because I love that. I'll say hi back. So anyway, you guys take care. Like I said, share, like, and subscribe, and hit the notification bell so that you can be reminded the next time I do another video. Okay, so on to the rest of the piece. We'll be sanding that next. Okay, see you in a bit.